And now to the topic we have at hand, that is analyzing President Tinubu's second term in office. So I'm going to be starting with my guest here in the studio. When it comes to looking at the economy from 2023 to 2025, making President Bola Tinubu's office stay in office 2 years, how would you look at the economic reforms? Which one would you say are being of help to us, and which ones would you say that definitely it should have been trashed?
Okay, so when we look at I must commend the presidency for the last 2 years when it comes to economic reforms, right? Although the political reforms are not complementing with the economic reforms, right? So it is a very strong stance, right? And there have been a lot of positives, right? So we see the foreign reserve increased significantly to over $38 billion. We also see that the ability to settle short-term interest obligation is meant to be an average of a month. It is up to like 7 to 8 months. We're also seeing that despite the reduction in the prices of fuel, which is our major budget factor, we're seeing a bit of expansion. Now, that is not just based on the CBN governor, it's also based on some major players, right? So, for example, we used to import like about 68% to 70% of our total import is based on refined crude produce. So, but Dangote launching the 650,000 barrel production capacity in Nigeria has trimmed that down, right? So we don't import as much fuel as we used to import, as much PMS and as much. So there's a bit of volatility in that sector. So the demand for the foreign exchange has also reduced significantly, which means that Nigeria is still meant to have a bit of appreciation. Although when we look at it from the purchasing power parity, that is, we compare the average prices of goods in other countries with the average prices of goods and commodities in Nigeria, Nigeria's currency is still undervalued. That is, Nigeria should be trading between a 1,100 to 1,150. However, what is of key concern and what is most disheartening is the rate at which our debt level is rising. There's nothing wrong with taking debt, but what is the effect of taking those debts? What are you using those debt for? Are you investing those debts in infrastructures that are going to be profitable for the country over the long term? So let's take a classical example. Last year, the national grid collapsed like about 12 times. Is it a time to continue to replenish or package that same old national grid? Or can we set up independent and a new national grid system? Yeah, it can be very capital intensive. Can we even give private parties to have an independent power plant across different? Yeah, we've seen several places in some industrial hub, they generate their power supply and they have been relatively stable. Can we allow the gencos, can we disaggregate their powers? Why should I have to rely on EKEDC, or why should I have to rely on Ikeja electricity and I cannot even negotiate my prices of electricity? Right. Of course, we still say that there still be a bit of subsidy in the electricity sector, and in which they need to review the prices. Of course, yes, I understand that there's still a bit of subsidy in the electricity sector, and why can't Nigeria even boast of 24-hour power supply? Now, we have a situation whereby, when I looked at the entourage, when the president of Nigeria came to Lagos for the West African ECOWAS summit, and I looked at the value of that entourage alone, and I wept for Nigeria, because if the value of that, I compare with the value of entourage in other places, like somewhere in the likes of Netherlands, where the prime minister rides on the bicycle, right, and he's not scared of anything. But you've seen billions of last time I stopped counting, when I looked at the value of the fleet of the vehicles, over 15 billion naira just to protect just one single man. And we saw a case whereby we are commissioning a 30-kilometer road of a 700-kilometer. So I think there's still a bit of misplaced priorities. So it's good for you to have, we see that the CBN is tightening monetary policy measures, very strong tightening on the monetary policy measures, compared to when we had Emefiele, who was more or less having a very laissez-faire approach, and it was more or less side-funding public funds to go and develop a real estate of over 753 duplexes. Like, is he going to live? And that's something I like about debt. Debt humbles people a lot. So when you die today, right, and the Muslim burial is so funny, right? They just wrap you what we call teru, just a piece of linen, right, which are going to be wrapped with, and it's not more than 6 feet. And so even if you have 753 duplexes, why do you want to privatize that? Also, another call that the government should look at is those forfeited real estate. Can they be constructed to low-cost housing scheme that is going to benefit the masses? And can there be infrastructures developed around it? We see what Mofi is doing with the MREIF, like is the Mofi Real Estate Investment Fund, in which there are affordable although all their housing estate is not affordable to the low class housing like people like us, but we can see that once there are structures, when there are policies, when there are governance within place, we could see a bit of development. Despite the fact that the monetary policy is tightening, and although it's still very difficult for businesses to be able to thrive within this particular situation, yeah, we see that the central bank reduced the interest rate on treasury bills, OMO bills, and relative indexes, where that's to show that a bit of confidence, and they are reducing a lot of supply. And within that particular space, we saw that monetary policy rate is still a little bit high, 27.5%, and it has been within that corridor since since last year. Even, let's say, since November till now, there's not been any change in the monetary policy rate, which that the monetary policy arm of the government is not confident that that is going to be sustainable. When we look at the inflation rate, the real market inflation rate is above 30%, although we are still seeing like about 23.7%, which simply means that, and that's as a result of rebasing effect. With things that are happening, a stable inflation rate is, when we look at the budget, the plan is for them to be for us to have a stable inflation rate of around 15% or a single-digit inflation rate. But we cannot get there yet because, one, the government is not investing in the right infrastructures, and the government keeps on believing that prayer will address security issues.
That is definitely something to think about. Prayers addressing security issues. We are not saying it's not possible. But, not to sound like someone who is of little faith. We are not saying it's not possible, but a lot of things definitely needs to go in place. So now to you're a virtual guest. When it comes to the issue of governance and politics in Nigeria, how would you rate Tinubu's 2 years in office, especially when it seems as if a lot of people are dumping opposition parties to move to the ruling party?
Well, it depends on that assertion of people dumping opposition parties and moving to the ruling party depends on who you're asking. Because from where I sit, I see more people actually clamoring for coalition governments and opposition coalitions to wrestle power in the second year. Normally, there's 4 cycles. There's 4 cycles in an pre-election, which is when you win the election. Everybody spends 1 year or 2 years waiting for you. Then there's the primaries, and then there's the general election. The 1 year, 2 years they are waiting for you, usually it gives people a sense of direction as to whether it is good enough for them to endorse you for a second term, or it is something that they really want to kick out. And you have a lot more people across the greater Nigeria forming and clamoring for a coalition to unseat the ruling government. And for me, that is a huge indicator that this president and his reforms are not exactly acceptable to the broad spectrum. And if you look at the wave of defections, anyways, most of them are south of the River Niger. But the real electoral voice is north of the River Niger. The average voting figure in places like Lagos, Ogun, is between 300,000 to about 500, 600,000 for whoever is winning. But the average voting figure in places like Kaduna, Kano, Katsina, Kebbi, Zamfara is between 500,000 to over 1 million. And so when you see places like that actually coming out of their way to say, no, we actually start setting up a movement. It doesn't matter whether we're working together or we're working individually, we are all going after this president. In the second year, not even a primary year, which is next year, we're talking about second year, and you have this noise across the board, including defections to the president's ruling party in the second year. It shows you that there are issues that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed really, really.
The issues that needs to be addressed, we always still come back to the one of the economy, because once people are not, if the standard of living is not improving, then for them nothing is working, because no matter how much you try to convince people that, okay, we've put this in place, we've put that in place, but am I still paying exorbitantly for transport? Is my rent price increasing? Is food price increasing? Then I'm not feeling anything. That is probably what an average Nigerian would feel. But now let us look at one of the other sectors that seems to be affecting a lot of people, especially when it comes to businesses, and that is the one of electricity, which you mentioned earlier. But now we have the World Bank advising Nigerians to Nigeria government to do away with electricity subsidy, while we are still dealing with the hardship of removal of fuel subsidy. So would it be a wise thing for Nigeria to consider that advice from the World Bank and still do away with the electricity subsidy, which they have termed as wasteful?
So the thing is, for you to even approach the World Bank in the first place, or for you to approach IMF in the first place, they are going to give you some terms and conditions. So World Bank is not going to have a say over us whether we have subsidies on electricity or subsidies on fuel if we don't go and meet them and ask for a loan, because they want to be sure that you are able to pay back the loan. I could remember I was so disappointed when the president was asking for a waiver or a debt forgiveness of a loan. You went to take a loan in the first place, and you're asking for a waiver and debt forgiveness. And even at a point in time, they were putting hands into our pension funds, the retirees funds, to be able to do that. So my concern is, when you even get this loan, do those loans go to the sustainable infrastructural development? I don't have an issue paying as high cost of. So if you look at it, my average kilowatt hour for Band A is like about 209, right, or 210. The cost of a liter of fuel is, let's say, 900. So relatively, it's still cheaper. But can everybody even afford that? Even the Band A that I say I enjoy privilege of, anytime there is rain like this, I'm always scared, right? Or I'm not enjoying up to 20 to 24 hours. That's even in an eyebrow location. So compared to places that are even in Band A, that they don't even see electricity in days, in weeks. In fact, there are some places in Lagos, in the suburb of Lagos, that they say 2 days on, 1 day off.
And they are paying 210 naira.
And they are still paying, okay, they are in Band B, or they are saying.
Okay.
Right. So that's to show that our infrastructures for that is moribund. So what I would advise the federal government to do is that, yes, you want to generate, but disaggregate. Can you even disaggregate the generating arm? Or can you allow the independent power plants? There's enough gas. In fact, we have not exported as much gas as we have exported as fuel. And we have a lot of gas that we can use to convert to electricity. So can we source alternative sources of generating electricity, and don't allow some people to be so dependent on that. Ikeja electricity, if you want to get a meter in Ikeja electricity, in fact, when I wanted to get a prepaid meter, I had to escalate to NERC, Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, before I'm able to get a prepaid meter, and that even took a period of 9 months for me to be able to get that. Now, they'll tell you that there is no prepaid meter, because once they give you the estimated billing, they are going to give you a bill that you're not able to pay. So even compared to when the prepaid meter first started, during the time of Fashola regime, right, when a lot of people, they were even distributing it freely. But now, if you want to ask for prepaid meter, it's more or less like a pain in the ass, right? And when we look at estimated billing, we are going to see, also look at the issue that happened between Ikeja Electricity and the military at one point in time, some months ago. So that's to show you that a lot of people, so we have some people that still believe that entitlement, that because we are the force, because we are the federal government, you are saying, so why is it that the Gencos are complaining that they don't even have enough things to be able to manage? They have like about 4 trillion debt that the presidential villa is not being able to pay, or the federal government coffers. And the next thing we saw, that rather than the government addressing the debt, we saw that government wanted to do a solar of what? Like several, I think it's that 10 billion a day, and they want to spend to do solar. So if the presidency is enjoying a solar outreach, what about the common man, the masses on the street? So do you want to tell the common man on the street to go and do solar too? So I think there's a lot of misplaced priorities, right? And there's certain things that are going to drive infrastructural development, or that are going to drive the prices. So if I look at the cost of financing is, let's say, 30%, 35%. Cost of electricity is way high. Cost of ease of doing business is so high. Cost of transportation too, for me to even ship the goods and services across, is so high. Cost of data and internet supply, those two, they've also increased it from 4 naira for message to 6 naira, and they've also increased the call tariffs and the rest of them. I can remember at a point in time I had an escalation with one of these network providers, and they said, no, that particular fund that you have is gone. It's gone. There's nothing we can do about it. So when you look at all this, the cost of living in Nigeria keeps on getting higher and higher. So, and when we have a situation whereby companies have not even been able to adjust the salaries, Only probably in the financial services sector that you see that, okay, there's increased salaries and the rest of them. But in the normal services, right, in the normal manufacturing and the rest, the cost of even increasing salaries is also there. And also, we're also losing skilled staff. So if you look at in Nigeria, the cost, especially in the medical line, right, and it's so disheartening. I think you should have even stemmed that a bit, but it keeps on getting worse, where our bright brains, our best brains are leaving Nigeria for greener pastures. So why are they leaving? You're a graduate, you spend 7 years in the university, and you cannot even afford to live a basic life. That is, rent a decent accommodation, enjoy a vacation. But when you even go there, those that are even packing shit, those that are even taking care of the elderly, are able to live a better life when it comes to even be able to afford the basic needs than you that have spent 6 years, 7 years in the university, and you are able to get a job in Nigeria. You are able to, what they are able to save or what they are able to develop within a space of 4 or 5 years. You that you are, they come back, they come and do dirty December, and they come and put a lot of burden again on you, and they now use the time IJGB. I just got back. And you see a lot of houses here. So I think the government is not placing as much priorities in the core drivers of the nation's economy, right? So we have a case of student loan, right, where people can be able to have access to loans, funding schemes. But what is the improvement in our universities? What is the? We had a case, even though that someone, Olivia, had to step up and add the confrontation with JAMB. We are still going to see a bit of decadence within that particular sector. So yes, the only thing that the JAMB registrar had to do is to come out and be shedding crocodile tears. Yes, I know it's so emotional. Yeah. I love people that are very, very emotional. But what step has been taken to be able to address that particular gap, and what would have been the effect of those 330,000 people that had an opportunity to receipt, right? So can we say that this same thing has been happening years and years and years where people are not able to speak up? So if we have that kind of decadence within the educational sector, we have that kind of issues also within the electricity sector, I don't think that we are still ready for a bit of improvement. Although when it comes to monetary reforms, when it comes to monetary policies, we've seen a bit of improvement. We even saw that the Central Bank of Nigeria, Yemi Cardoso, which we usually call Cardi B, got an award as the best African Central Bank governor in the year 2025, right? That was sometime last 2 weeks. And we are seeing a bit of stronger confidence in the Nigerian people willing to invest in Nigeria, in Nigerian equities, not Nigerians' infrastructure. So there's a difference between investing in Nigerian equities that are just sitting down somewhere that is not driving the real economy. So I just go and buy shares, I go and buy bonds, I go and buy foreign bonds, I go and buy sukuk bonds and the rest of them. But what would those bonds be used for? It's just like I'm storing money somewhere. So we see situations whereby people go and invest in treasury bills, OMO bills, that is doing, you just keep your money somewhere, and it's not even translating into core development of Nigeria. You see that, although that is a bit of an indication that something good is likely to come out. But what will be more attractive is for us to see this core investment come into the real sector and drive the real sector. But because the cost of doing business in Nigeria keeps on getting higher and higher and higher by the day. And if this keeps getting, who is going to feel the real impact? The final consumers. So we saw a case, another situation whereby the 4 tax bills that were presented to the House are beginning to get we're waiting for the president assent on those tax bills. So we are seeing that there are some right steps in the right directions, but it seems like we are taking 1 step forward, 2 steps backward, and it simply comes down to who are those that you've built your cabinet with. So you still see a lot of people within the National Assembly defecting to this ruling political party. We also see the personality of the Senate President. We also see the personalities of the Defense Minister, and we can say that we're not yet ready for us to be able to drive that change. And for you to drive a whole change, it is easier to destroy, right? But it's going to take more years for you to be able to build, right? So if you want to build as fast as possible, right? A lot of Nigerians will be very, very happy if we can bring back the foreign exchange from 1,600 to, let's say, 200. And we know that the price of fuel subsidy, everybody's going to come down. Yeah. But for you to do that, it's not just based on paperwork or going to meet World Bank to go and take loans. We are increasing our debt exposure, and it's not sustainable for Nigeria over the long term.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for that. And now to our virtual guest, when we look at the governance and politics in Nigeria, one of the key things that took place this year was declaration of state of emergency in Rivers State. So if you are to analyze how that took place, how would you judge so to speak, the president's decision of declaring a state of emergency and suspending the House of Assembly, the governor, and the deputy in that state. Do you think that is the right step in the right direction, seeing that by this June it's going to be 3 months and counting, but we've not really seen anything that is definitive to show that perhaps the state of emergency is going to be suspended in River State? What are your thoughts on the president's decision there?
The president is the president of the country, and his job is for the security of lives and property of everybody. And to the best of my knowledge, he has shown based on things that he's I think that's a horrible precedence, because it now means that subsequent presidents can just remove elected officials, and it's and I'm not disputing about his faith or his reasons behind it. I'm looking at the ripple effects of suppressing of weakening the power of governors, of weakening even the choice of voting. Because one of the tenets of university was
I really wanted to have his thoughts, so having shared thoughts with us on the decision of the president Bola Tinubu on declaration of state of emergency, which is climbing into the 3rd month, and then, well, who knows, maybe by September, before September, we'll be seeing a change.